All right, I think we are live. So welcome everyone to another live stream here, a special Saturday edition here to avoid any kind of scheduling overlaps on Father's Day tomorrow. But hopefully you guys are all having a good weekend so far here. And thanks so much to all of you who are already joining in. I see we got Sanjeev here, Jazzbo, Triton Car Guy, and Tesla Boy Gaming. Thanks for joining everyone. And so as you will see, I have commenting turned on to only subscribers this time since we got a little bit of spam last week. And so we'll try this out. Hopefully everyone's already a subscriber anyway, so it won't be an issue, but just wanted to put it out there. But you don't have to be a member. Of course, members will get priority answering like they always do here in the live streams, and also anyone who does a super chat, they'll also get priority answering. But we'll go for about 2 hours here like usual, unless we don't have enough questions, then we can end early. But in the meantime, I see the first question here from Sanjeev says, "Hey Matt, how are you? I'm thinking of getting a 2023 Tesla Model 3 Performance or 2023 Polestar 2 long range single motor, as I like the features and the fuel economy." So as far as those two are concerned, I would say, it's going to come down to, what features you care about. Like the Polestar has gauges, it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which are two things for me that disqualified me from ever considering a Tesla, because I really like having those two things. If those two things don't matter to you and it's kind of a toss up, then I would say, the Tesla has the faster charging, the better charging network, at least until next year. We'll see once the floodgates open up with the superchargers. But I mean, for now, it's, the better charging network as well. The Polestar 2, I have not driven, so it's really hard for me to give an opinion on it. But based on the specs and, what we know about it and the stuff that's out there, it seems like it's pretty good. But I think, Tesla, as long as you don't mind not having the smartphone integration, Tesla has the better tech, the better integration with the app and all that. They also have more service centers and stuff. And also they're so cheap right now that it's really, again, unless you must have the smartphone integration or gauges, I think you got to go with a Tesla. I think it's the better deal right now, and it's just really tough to beat. So that'd be my suggestion there. Thanks so much, Sean, for gifting a membership too. I really appreciate that. And I think, yeah. And so Sean actually another Sean was able to grab that. So congrats. And thank you so much for the generosity there, Sean. So we have Jazz says, glad you had time to shave, Matt. Yeah, I finally had some time here this morning. On the weekends, things slow down a little bit, so I'm able to take care of myself. Mike says the GTI news is insane considering it's barely a difference in consumption. Yeah, I think it's like 0.02 grams difference. Yeah, it is kind of insane. I don't know if they're trying to do that to cause a little bit of an uproar to try and get more leverage to push back on the Euro 7 stuff or what. But yeah, I mean, it's such a minor thing. I guess, some of the outlets have justified that, like, yes, it's a tiny amount, but whenever you're talking about, a lot of Golfs, then, I still agree with you. I don't think it's justified. But that's their decision, and it's kind of a shame because they really do play up the whole like this is part of our heritage and it's a big deal, and so maybe this is just like trying to transition everyone as well into the idea of an electric GTI. If you're at least getting everyone used for the next half generation, you're getting everyone used to just an automatic GTI. Then you kind of ease them into the electric thing a little bit easier for those, diehards that do love the manual. But I think anyone that loves the manual is just going to go shop elsewhere, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw this week, but the Integra Acura reported that 19% of the sales this year were for the manual. It was a lot higher. I think it was 70% of the take rate was manual for the first adopters that bought them last year. But then this year so far, it's been 19. So it's dropped a lot, but still 19% is still pretty good. And I think Acura pointed out that even 19% of those manual sales is more sales than many of the other competitors do in general. So the Integra is just killing it as far as sales go, which is great and awesome that they're going to continue to offer the manual there and that. And Sean, thank you so much for the super chat here. He says, your thoughts on the Mazda 3 hatch all-wheel drive? I'm looking for a fun family car, prefer handling over speed. Turbo is out of my budget at the moment anyway. So it's really good. I mean, I would say that the naturally aspirated one is still really punchy. That 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder is a real overachiever. It's geared well with a 6-speed automatic. It really feels punchy off the line. And I think actually feels in some instances a little faster than some of the turbo stuff, like what you get with the Civic Sport touring hatches and things like that. So to me, I really like the Mazda 3 hatch. Now, if you're talking about it as a family vehicle, they're not the roomiest. And I think if you're looking for, the most space for family stuff, a Civic hatch is going to serve you better. It's got a bigger back seat, bigger hatch. I'm not sure if you're even considering a Civic, but that's the only thing about the Mazda 3s. It's basically the smallest in its segment from as far as back seat goes, I think. And as far as the hatch space, it's not a ton. It's not horrible. The hatch is certainly better than some smaller trunks and some other competitors, I think, but it's still just, it's not the roomiest family car. So, keep that in mind. Definitely have the whole family sit in it and see if you feel comfortable from a size standpoint. Aside from that, I think it's a great vehicle. I mean, the all-wheel drive, makes it great if you live in a place that gets bad weather. And, I really like the Mazda 3. So I think that's a solid choice. They seem like they run forever. They last a long time. Really luxurious interior. Even at the lower trims, you still have nice leatherette seats and stuff. So I think it's definitely one to consider for sure, and hopefully that helps you. If you have any follow-up questions, I'll try to keep an eye out for them in the regular comment section here as well. Woo! But anyway, getting back to the other questions here, Goth Rocker says, "Hello, I probably will be in and out during this chapter, doing work around the house. Saturday is busy for me catching up on house duties. Totally get that. Totally understand." David says, Toyota Enthusiast EV. I wonder what the price range will be for that. We were talking about that yesterday in the weekly update. I mean, if it's a GR product, it's not going to be super cheap. And if it's an electric thing, then obviously it's going to be higher cost than like a GR86. Could even be more expensive than a GR Corolla or something like that. So I would bank on it being 50 grand at least, maybe even more. We'll have to see, how they position it, what it's based on, or if it's its own thing. Unless they do something real bare bones and have a small battery in it and all that, and maybe make a, little spiritual successor to the MR2 or something, then maybe you could see that come in at a lower price point. But, any electric vehicle that's, coming down the road, I just would safely assume it's going to be pricey. That's just the way most of these EVs are going. Omar says, what's the closest midsize electric truck to start production soon? I mean, as of right now, no one really has anything on the horizon. I mean, there's rumors that Dodge is working on, or Ram, I should say. I still don't I still say the Dodge Ram half the time. But anyway, Ram is still working on something supposedly that is rumored to be electric midsize truck. That's what the dealers supposedly saw at the Vegas convention. But I just really don't know, if that's going to, I think there's nothing really on the horizon. Ford might be the next most likely candidate. They've probably are going to want to do EV versions of the Ranger at some point and the Maverick at some point as well. But unfortunately, it seems like we're several years away from anything like that. So it's going to be a while, I think. And Jean says, with how more and more cars are being made out of composites and plastics, how long do you think current vehicles will last compared to older cars? Well, the good thing about the plastics and the composite stuff is it doesn't rust. That was the big issue with a lot of vehicles that took them off the road, even if the engines were solid. Japanese stuff in particular for a while there, the engine can run forever, but the whole car rusted away around it, and that, kind of hurt their longevity. So I think obviously some of those core components are still going to be metal, so they're still going to have that component. But I think with the exterior parts, it's not going to wear as much. Some stuff, if you're talking about like the cladding that's, matte black, like you see on Subaru Crosstreks and stuff like that, that won't age great because that's going to get baked in the sun and look terrible, sooner rather than later. But I think as far as longevity goes, it's not going to hurt their longevity. They'll still, last just as long. It's just, how pretty are they going to look after all that time? But again, you could say the same thing about rusty panels. So I don't think that's really going to change too much in my opinion, but I'm no expert as far as, body shop work or anything. So maybe one wears out faster than the other. I'm not sure. And Carlos says, hi, Matt, happy Father's Day. Hope you enjoy it with the little one. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Carlos. And happy Father's Day also to anyone else in here who's a father. Hope you enjoy your day tomorrow. And, it's one of those things that it's a tough job sometimes, but it's totally worth it and so much fun. Mike says, I didn't see that about the Integra, but it's still strong considering all the people who were waiting for it got it last year. Yeah. So that shows that it's really pulling in, a lot of people just off the street that aren't, Integra fans or, anything like that. And so they also Acura said in that press release that's I think their largest amount of conquest buyers, and that it's really selling hotly with people under 35, which I was actually surprised to hear because I've been seeing a good amount of Integras driving around, but I would say that it's a pretty good split. And I think I actually, in the ones that I remember seeing the drivers, I think most of those have been on the older side that I've seen driving Integras. So I'm kind of surprised they're saying that most of them were selling to people under 35, but that also goes to show that, people appreciate a nicer Civic. And even though that's essentially what it comes down to, people are eating that up. And also, not only are people eating it up, but they're eating it up to the point where 80% of those people are cool with a CVT nicer Civic as well. So it's, all the haters that were, super against that car, it's turning out that Acura knew what they were doing, at least so far. They're selling very well. So it's one of those things where the internet kind of skews reality and you think, oh man, this car is going to bomb. But the people in charge, they're not going to gamble all this money for nothing. And there are flops in the car industry, but, I think with the right marketing and the right product, a lot of vehicles can rise above any kind of negative internet commentary. So Two's here. Thanks for joining too. Saul says, hi Matt, can you speak to the stiffness of the new Type R? Is comfort mode still too stiff on normal everyday roads? Coming from a 2014 Chevy Cruze, so I want more than an SI could give stock. Okay, so stiffness, I still have only driven it on the press launch. I'm hopefully going to be getting one for a week here in the next month or two, fingers crossed, to really live with and really dig into that question. So if you're not in a hurry, stay tuned for my impressions on that, hopefully relatively soon. As far as, what I experienced on the drive program last fall, it definitely is on the stiff side. And you're coming from a regular Cruze, it's going to be stiffer for sure. Whether it's too stiff is going to come down to your personal preference, the roads that you drive on, and just what your tolerance is for stiff, suspensions, and what some person considers stiff might not be stiff to someone else or not so bad. Like for example, me and my one friend, even whenever I was in the last generation Civic Type R, and I took him for a ride, he loved it in the super stiff mode, and the FK8s in that super stiff mode to me is too much. But he's like, oh, I drive around like this all the time. And actually, Hyundai Albert Bierman, I believe, whenever I was on the Elantra N launch, he was talking to all of us journalists, and he said, a lot of people complained that the stiffest mode for the N settings and the Veloster N, he's like, a lot of people thought that was too stiff, but he's like, our data shows that a ton of our buyers love that super stiff ride, and they drive around all day as their daily driver in that super stiff mode. So people like that. So it's, again, going to really come down to what your preference is. And what you're willing to accept beyond your Chevy Cruze. But I think the really good thing is Honda does a really good job with their damper tuning. So comfort mode is softer, and it definitely makes a difference. I still think, and I will have to have more time with the new one to really nail this opinion down, but I'm pretty sure the previous generation was softer. So if you want the softest riding Type R possible, I'd actually go for the last gen, potentially. Now that could change if I spend a week with it and can develop more thoughts on my own roads, but it just seemed to me a little bit stiffer in comfort mode than the last gen. But it's better in every other way. So again, it's going to come down to exactly what you're willing to put up with. So sorry, that's not a super good answer just yet, but like I said, stay tuned for me to have one for a week here, and hopefully I'll have a better opinion for you and more info down the road. And Luco, thank you so much for the super chat. He said, I had a JL Freed Honda in Eastern PA tell me all Civic SIs are mandatory $5,000 over sticker. I walked right out. Vote with your wallet, with your dollars, people. Yeah. Definitely. I can't believe, was that recent, Luke? Because that's kind of ridiculous if they're still trying to get markups, because now Honda's really flooding the lots with a ton of inventory. And I was hoping a lot of those Honda markups would melt away now that they actually have good inventory. I mean, even Integras, for example, at the Acura dealer by me, there's a whole row of them just sitting there. So I'm hoping that they're loosening up on that stuff. Otherwise, they'll be sitting on a lot of inventory if they're going to still be sticklers on those markups. But that's, yeah, 100%. Do not pay a markup if you can avoid it, unless, you don't mind, throwing the money out the window, whatever. But I was talking about someone with the GR Corolla when I posted that commercial earlier this week as a community post where people are complaining about how they can't get GR Corollas. And I'm like, you got to travel to get one. And there was even someone who commented in the comments and said, I'm a Toyota dealer. I have a GR Corolla in Florida. Come and get it if you want it. So it's one of those things you got to just sometimes do the road trip, hunt it down, call 50 dealerships if you have to. I'd rather do that than pay a markup. It's just a lot of people in America, especially, are used to just strolling down to their local dealership and having a dozen cars to pick from and every color available. And, it's been a tough learning curve for a lot of people the past few years here with car shopping. Like it probably will never be that easy ever again, because these dealers want to be tighter with inventory now and not waste money with stuff sitting there and having to discount stuff. If you make it always rare and hard to get, then you might lose out on a few sales, but they're way more profitable. And don't listen to anything dealers tell you some kind of sob story, because they are all making a ton of money. The past 3 years have been like some of the most profitable for most dealers of all time. They're all feasting and having a good old time. They are not hurting whatsoever. So definitely don't enable them with any more markup payments. And anyway, moving on here. Sean says, when I was growing up, I usually had to cram in the back seats of coupes, and I was 6 feet at 13. Wow, my kid can survive a Mazda. Well, there you go. Then you should be fine. But just one thing to note there is, especially if you are tall, it's going to be tough for anyone to sit behind you in the Mazda. Though. Just full disclosure there. I love the Mazda, but it does not have a roomy back seat. And 2 says, so I never understood how someone could make a living buying bad decisions and posting it on Facebook. We know who I'm talking about. Fun to watch, though. I'm out of the loop, as you know. I don't watch much YouTube or Facebook, so I have no clue what you're talking about there too. But it sounds juicy. Some juicy gossip there. So wish I wasn't out of the loop on that. Goth Rocker says, Matt, did I read your response to my comment on the Mazda CX-90 video? Yeah, I did. I think I responded to Goth Rocker. Maybe you missed it, but the Lincoln Aviator is a good competitor to the CX-90 there. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And he said Ford's also probably bringing back the Taurus. I haven't heard that. I would love for them to bring back the Taurus, but I mean, it would be interesting to see Ford reverse course, because I feel like Ford is one of those companies that really is very, I'm trying to find a good word to use. Ford, they stand by their decisions. They, it's one of those things where I think they always think they're headed in the right direction, whether or not they are or not. So it'd be interesting to see them admit or pivot and say, actually, maybe we were wrong about sedans. So I don't know. I don't know if their company echo chamber would allow them to even enter that idea into their mind, but I would love to see a Taurus come back for sure. And Tom says, Luke, you did the right thing. Markups won't go away if we don't boycott them. Totally true. Tesla Boy Gaming says, hi, Matt. I looked at an SI yesterday with 8,000 miles. It didn't have the HPT package, and they were charging 33 grand. Man, that's crazy. I guess if the used market is still there for that stuff, like whatever. I actually, just for the other day, I was looking at prices for GR86s and BRZs. And used ones of those are all over 30 grand, basically. It's like you can buy a new one for less than a used one still. So I don't know when that's going to correct itself. It seems like it's overdue and should have already. So too, thank you for the super chat. He says, YouTube, I mean a certain Tyler and his garage. I don't watch his channel. So I won't get into that, but yes, there's some interesting characters on YouTube, and but they get the views, people enjoy it, or they fall for it, or whatever the case might be. And so it's the same thing as markups. People keep watching, those people will still be enabled to keep doing whatever it is they're doing. And so that's the way it goes. You guys vote not only with your dollars, but also with your eyeballs and with your clicks, and that's huge, especially for us YouTubers. That's without you guys watching the videos, I wouldn't be able to do this anymore. I'd go back to doing something else. And, it's all, you guys are truly the thing that keep YouTube running and keep all of us able to do our dream jobs or whatever kind of, job it is. But it's interesting. I'll try to stay out of the weeds today with the drama as best I can and actually just be helpful and give advice. Triton Car Guy says, the last time I was at a dealership was for service, not to buy. I usually try and stay away from dealerships, and that's the one great thing about electric vehicles. You can stay away from dealerships longer. The Mach-E, there's no yearly service. I don't have to ever see the dealer. I think it's like you have to change, I think, the fluid and the diff on the electric motor or something at some point. You got to change like minor little things. You got to get the brakes checked at some point down the road, but brakes last longer. And so it's like, I love never having to go to a Ford dealer. And thankfully with the Bullet, doing the yearly oil changes, I have my mechanic friend who handles that for me, so I've been able to avoid dealerships as well. Goth Rocker says, I'm a car guy, not sure I will ever buy an SUV, but I was shocked the Lincoln Aviator is great. I test drove it while my Continental was being serviced. The Mazda needs that transmission issue fixed. Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, I don't think it's a deal breaker, and I still love the CX-90 enough that if I was in the market for something in that segment, that's probably still what I would go with. But I'm also used to the jerkiness of manual transmissions, me driving in my whole life and stuff. So, I mean, for me, it's not as big of a deal, but for the average person, they probably think it's broken or something, So it's definitely, it's one of those things that'll come down to the individual. But the Aviator, I've never actually driven the Aviator, so I can't comment on that at all. But if it's drive similar to the Explorer, I did drive the Explorer ST of this generation, and that was okay. Just the interior in that car really let me down. It was not up to what it should be for that kind of a price point. So that's the only letdown there. But otherwise, yeah, I need to get into another Explorer at some point because it's been a few years since I did it, and I think I need to give it another look for a review. And Mike says, Matt, did you hear about DeSantis blocking direct-to-consumer sales for Legacy Auto? And what are your thoughts? Well, I definitely don't want to get into political stuff, so I won't comment on DeSantis in Florida in general. But what I can say is fairness, right? Like everything should be fair. So, they made an exception for Tesla and then for nobody else. To me, that's crappy. Again, doesn't matter who it is that's doing it or where it's happening. Be fair. If you don't want direct to consumer, then don't do direct to consumer. But if you do want direct to consumer, then you have to open up to everybody. So it's, to me, an everything or nothing thing. And whenever you start picking and choosing, that raises some red flags in my mind, and kind of just, man, it's so hard to not get into this stuff. I think it's crappy. I'll just leave it at that. I think it's crappy. Be fair and don't give Tesla an advantage. But as we know, the world works in various ways, and it's not so much about fairness or ever about fairness, sadly, and more about who in many aspects of life. And I feel like that's one of those who things. It seems like DeSantis and Elon are buddies, and so Elon gets special treatment. But I could be out of the loop on that, but I won't say any more than that. But David, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, I own 3 ID4, 2 2021 Pro S Gradient, and a 2023 Pro S rear-wheel drive. Excellent charging and miles, 272 miles. Want to get BZ4X, but horrible range. So thank you so much for the super chat. And so, I think that's the problem with the BZ4X. Not only is the range not the best, but also the charging is really slow for the all-wheel drive version. Front-wheel drive one is totally fine. It's pretty par for the course these days. I think it does 150 versus the 100 kilowatt charging of the all-wheel drive one. But yeah, BZ4X is just going to be an uphill battle. It's really going to come down to if you're someone who never road trips, or you road trip in a very casual fashion. Otherwise, you can't recommend the BZ4X to someone. I'd say anyone that has one of those, if you do road trip, you got to rent a car. You got to have it as a second car or something like that. It can't be your only car, because road trips would just be miserable if you're in any kind of, hurry or mission to get to your destination quickly. And Goth Rocker also says, Matt, I did read your comment on the CX-90 video. Okay, so Ford dealer told me due to the Taurus name and legacy, they're considering bringing a Taurus back and a Lincoln sedan back. Interesting. See, I heard that if Ford was going to bring back a car, so to speak, it would be like a Taurus X, or I think they're going to call it the Fusion Active is the name I heard floated around. And that would be what would end up happening if they did something like that. And it would basically just be like a Subaru Outback competitor that wouldn't have a sedan version, at least here in the States. So that's what I've heard. Obviously they do, sedans in China and other places, but yeah, I'd love to see the Taurus name come back, but I also feel like they would just probably also want to stick with Fusion. I don't know. I feel like Taurus kind of has this dated stigma around it now, especially, like our generation. Like I grew up with, when the Taurus was a huge hit, and it's just kind of one of those like old cars, especially since the name hasn't been around for almost a decade now, probably. So it's, they try to put it on the 500 and stuff. It's just kind of a weird thing for the Taurus. I don't know. Dealers are also kind of iffy with their info sometimes, so it's hard to take that stuff to the bank sometimes. But yeah, I'd love to see a new Ford sedan come back. I think that'd be great. Um, and Car Dude says Rivian and Lucid have the exception too, for the Florida thing. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I guess that makes it a little more fair with the whole Florida thing. But to me, it's still why I'd love to hear the rationale as far as why they don't want legacy companies to have that, unless it's just that the dealer associations are fighting back. But then why the ban? Just let the dealer associations handle it instead of DeSantis trying to do that. I don't know. I'm out of the loop on that one a little bit. I saw the headline there, and I didn't really look too much beyond that. Trenton Car Guy says if they did bring back the Taurus, it'll likely be an EV and probably go up against the Charger EV. That'd be an interesting idea if they, as a Charger thing. That, I mean, Taurus, I guess they kind of rebranded as like a performance thing. That could be kind of cool. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if Ford ends up doing anything like that. I think they're really just, I mean, it seems like they're so excited for their trucks and their SUVs and raptoring all the things that I feel like cars are just so far off their radar now in the States that it's just not something they really care about as much. I don't know. I could be wrong though. And I did see that, sales of American brands in China have been dropping off because the Chinese EVs are cheaper and better in some ways for that buyer. And so, maybe if Ford and Lincoln have sunk all this development costs into these new sedans, and then they're not selling as well as they're hoping to in China, then maybe they'll be like, okay, well, let's try and recover some costs by offering it for a few years in the States just to pay off the engineering costs of those, and then let it ride off into the sunset again or something. That's the only kind of justification I could see for them bringing back a sedan, just to stop the bleeding if they're losing money in China or something. I don't know. And Trucking Car Guy said, I've driven the Fusion hybrid briefly and it was a pretty good car, all things considered. I had a Fusion for a rental car several different times, and I think the Fusions are great. They're really nice cars. And now, they've depreciated pretty quick. I think it's a really solid used buy if you just want a nice sedan. I think the Fusions are great. I think they always look nice. They had pretty good infotainment for the time and stuff. Yeah, I think the Fusions have always been a solid car. And Jersey Boy Greaser says America needs to bring back sedans to compete with the Camrys and Accords, which are still selling pretty well in this bland SUV world. They are selling pretty well. And I think there is, a lot of these diehard people who don't want to go into an SUV. And so they're, buying the sedans. And it helps that the sedans are really good. I mean, not only the Camry and the Accord, but also the Sonata, the K5, are really bringing some cool stuff. And so I think, yeah, it'd be great to see more sedans make a comeback. And I mean, I've read, there's ideas that potentially, as crossovers start selling to more and more older people who don't want to bend over and get into a car, that SUVs could someday become uncool, at least the crossover variety. And all the young people that can bend down and get into sedans will then be like, oh, this is the cool thing now because my grandparents have the crossover. I'm getting the sporty sedan. And that could kind of flip, and, people would kind of get over the whole idea of like, oh, I have a crossover, so therefore I'm wealthier or more capable of going outdoors or whatever the case is. And there are some people that actually use that stuff and use them for what they're intended for, but a lot of people don't, so I think those people might maybe go back into a sedan someday. We'll have to see. John says Ford should bring back the Thunderbird as an EV. The whole Thunder thing in the name is perfect for an electric car. I agree. Thunderbird. They also have, I believe, the rights to Thunderbolt because of a way back thing that they didn't really use a whole lot, but I think they have that name as well. Now, the Bolt thing might be a little iffy because of the Chevy Bolt, but if they call it Thunderbolt, I feel like that would be enough of a differentiation potentially. But Thunderbird, 100%. I don't know why they are sitting on that name. I hope they have a good plan for it. I wish they had put that on the Mach-E instead of calling it a Mustang, but I've already sat on that soapbox for far too long, so I won't go into that. But I mean, yeah, it'd be great to see the Thunderbird name show up on something at some point. And so Goth Rocker says, yeah, it's about increasing the sales from China. So, okay, well, that would make sense. I would love to see Ford, change course and bring the sedans back. That'd be great. I'm not optimistic still just because of Ford's corporate culture, but I'd love to be proven wrong for sure. Trent Car Guy says, I think Camrys and Accords sell well because they have brand equity and loyal customers, not to mention they're both known for reliability. Definitely, that's one of the key things with those. And it's like the go-to car for a lot of people. You want the most reliable thing out there, you get a Camry or a RAV4 or something. I mean, the RAV4 still is such a huge seller for that reason too. And Jersey Boy Grease said Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. Yeah, Fairlane would be a fun name to bring back too, although I feel like that's a little too like old timey for some people possibly. But Thunderbolt 100% would be awesome. And the Flip Biscuit says, now that you've seen the new GX, LX, TX, do you think they have advanced their cars enough interior tech, engine choices, overall design that they're up to snuff with the Euro/Korean and US rivals? Well, I think the GX is going to be a huge hit just for the styling alone. It doesn't even matter what's on the inside or how it drives. I mean, the styling alone, I mean, I've seen, it seems like they've gotten a very good response, especially from the GX. And the TX will sell just because the amount of people that have been wanting a through-row Lexus forever that's actually usable are, there's so many people like that. And so I think both those will sell super well. The LX, I think the LX, if you saw my review, I don't think it competes very well with everything else out there. It's just way too expensive. The tech's not there. It just doesn't have the space. That's the thing, that and the Sequoia and stuff. It's all about roominess. And they understand that, pretty well with like the Grand Highlander and the TX and then the other, products in the lineup. But for some reason, I think it's some of the Japan influence there with the LX in particular, where like it's still made for that market. So it can only be so big. And so it kind of limits its potential here in the States versus if the LX was actually built for Americans, I think it would be really different. I think that's kind of what you're seeing with like, Lexus is finally starting to get some control back with like them being able to do their own infotainment system now. And they finally convinced Japan, like, hey, like not everyone wants to use a controller. Like people in Japan might be fine with a controller, but here in the States, everyone just wants a touchscreen. And, they kind of finally were able to, make that case and succeed with, getting that win there and being able to do that. And now we have much better infotainment systems, especially in the Lexus models. Is a huge improvement over the old touchpad stuff for that reason. So, but there are still some of those things where I think Japan kind of holds it back as far as what the US market needs and wants. But I think the GX is going to be a great, I love that they didn't do the hybrid in the GX, at least yet. We know that, they said a hybrid's coming at some point down the road. We don't know anything about it. But I think, that makes the cargo area better. So it's an improvement over the Sequoia with that. And I think the GX is going to do really well. I mean, we'll have to wait for pricing to see how well it compares with everything else out there, but it is still so hard to compete with the companies that have been doing it for the longest, that build them here and, are able to subsidize the stuff with pickup truck engines and all that. So, I mean, stuff like the Tahoe, the Expedition are still going to be really tough to overthrow. And even Explorer and stuff like that. But I think GX especially, they're not going to have any problem selling GXs for several years. And same thing probably with the TX too. And Jean says the Ford Model E that would be the perfect affordable EV for Ford and a cool throwback. Yeah, and the Model E, I think they had copyrighted that name, and I think they were going to consider it, but then I don't know if it just was too close to Tesla or why they didn't go for that. I think they also just wanted something more clickbaity with the Mustang name for the Mach-E, and that's kind of why they went for that too. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Ford does with the names for future EVs that are coming down the road here. David also says, Matt, is the RZ450E the same bad charging curve as well? No, the RZs, they fixed it. The RZ, they all have 150 kilowatts. So they all get the better Panasonic battery pack, I believe, is the company that makes it. And so all RZs do 150, and 150 is fine. That's like what the Mach-E does and many others. That's a totally fine charge rate. So if you do want something on that platform, definitely go for the Lexus over the Toyota, especially if you want the all-wheel drive. If you want front-wheel drive, again, BZ4X front-wheel drive is totally fine from a charge standpoint. So Flip Biscuit says the tech is just lagging behind. I mean, in the new stuff, the LX, I can see what you mean potentially, even though the screen's still big enough, it has the smartphone integration and stuff. But with GX and TX, I mean, so, they both have, what is it, the 14-inch touchscreen. I mean, who else has a 14-inch touchscreen in that segment? I mean, I think, okay, it's like maybe 14.9 or 15 inches for the BMWs in that segment. But it's, to me, I think they're totally on par with the other competitors as far as tech goes, in my opinion, at least, just based on screen sizes and all that. I mean, you can debate about interior material quality and all that, but I think, tech wise, I don't think it's really that lagging behind like it used to be. Truck and Car Guy says Thunderbolt sounds awesome for a limited edition EV. Yeah, it could be cool for a limited edition too, but anything limited edition, I'm just like, ick, because it means it's going to be super expensive and marked up. I'm just not into limited edition stuff these days, and it seems like most of you aren't either, because so many people complain, when it's something that isn't mass produced. And let me see. So Jersey Boy Greaser says 11.5 second quarter mile off the showroom floor in 64 for the, I guess you're talking about the Thunderbolt there. I missed the, oh yeah, Thunderbolt was, 64 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. It was a rare factory drag car. Okay. So yeah, I knew there was some kind of historical connection. I just didn't remember. So thank you for bringing that up and educating me again there a little bit on that. So that's, yeah, pretty impressive. 11 and a half seconds for a quarter mile back then. Tom, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hey man, what's your thought on a slightly used EcoBoost Mustang manual with 3,000 miles? I saw one on Car Gurus for 30 grand with the active exhaust for car seats, or a new base Camaro 2.0 T manual for 27. So they're tuned differently. The Camaro Turbo is more of a top end kind of tune where it's all about, you still have to rev it out a good bit to get it really moving nicely. Whereas the EcoBoost is tuned to have a really torquey, punchy low end with the turbo, and there's not a whole lot of top end on that. So it's going to come down to what kind of driving style you have. Between those two, if it were me, and 30 grand versus 27, not a huge difference. I mean, I'm not crazy about the Recaro seats, so sit in those first to make sure you're comfortable in them. I would rather just have the more comfortable seats like I've had in all my other Mustangs. But I would pay the 3 grand more probably for the EcoBoost Mustang over the Camaro. Personally, the Mustang also has better visibility. There's a few other little things. The Camaro is still great, though. I think the Camaro still has better handling. So if handling is a top priority, that might sway you in the direction of the Camaro. But otherwise, I think, EcoBoost Mustang would still be my pick. I still really enjoyed my EcoBoost that I had for, almost 2 years there. And thank you so much once again for the super chat. And Trenton Car Guy says, also kind of a sucker for throwback names to military stuff, Mustang, Hellcat, Hornet, etc. Yeah, all very cool throwbacks for sure. And Challenger Chris says, I think Buick could bring back the Electra name. Yeah, they have, they put it on the concept car, and now there's like, the talk of, the Electra E5, I think is what the first one's called in China. They're using the name in China, and I think they will here in the States too, for their EVs. I don't think they've officially confirmed that. I can't remember. It's been a while since I covered that in the weekly update, but there is Electra stuff happening, and it'd be a perfect name for those. And I think Buick's definitely on the right track. They're using those names for their EVs. And Flip Biscuit says, heading out. Happy Father's Day, Matt. Thanks so much for joining. I appreciate it. And I totally understand, not everyone has the time to spend 2 hours here hanging out. I totally appreciate that. Jersey Boy says, love to see a modern Buick GNX take the V6 twin turbo out of the CT5. That's a cool idea. That would be awesome. I think it's just, GM is so focused on the EV stuff right now that it's one of those things that maybe if the transition wasn't happening as fast as it was, that could be something that could happen. But the problem is, what do you put it in? Since Buick got rid of all their sedans too, that would have been a prime thing for them to do back whenever they had the Regal still around. But the Regal GS, just ended up, being just a regular naturally aspirated V6. So that was, I think they kind of missed the opportunity there. They could have done it back then with the ATS, motor or something. But it's all these kind of fun things. I'm sure there's other GM employees that were trying to get that kind of stuff worked out, and it just probably never happened for whatever reason. And Joel says, what do you think about, okay, just leave the comment here. So something about Toyotas down the road. But getting back to some other questions I might have missed here earlier on. Let's see. So Angel just said, happy Father's Day, Matt. Hope you get to enjoy the day with your family. Yep, we're going to have a great day tomorrow, and that's part of why I'm doing the live stream here today as well. And so Caleb, going back to the markup discussion earlier, said he sees Broncos everywhere now, but Ford are still charging $8 grand over sticker. Yeah, I'd be curious to see how many dealers are still charging markups on Broncos, because I think that might have softened a little bit too, potentially. But I don't know. It's something I haven't been keeping up with, so I have no idea. And some other questions here. So Retro Reaction says 17-inch or 19-inch wheels on a new CX-5 naturally aspirated. It comes down to whether you want handling or ride quality more. Obviously, the 17s will be smoother, and the 19s will be sportier. I mean, from the times I've driven the CX-5, though, they weren't overly stiff on the 19s either. So I think either one's probably totally fine. And so, Yeah, just comes down to which of those two camps you fall in. And Luke also talking earlier about the SI says, yeah, that was 2 weeks ago with the markup on the SI. They say they only get 5 SIs per year. That seems strangely low, but I guess if that's what they told you, then that's their plan and they're sticking to it, unfortunately. So, and also Caleb says, overall thoughts on the Grecale. Do you think Macan needs a full refresh? Grecale, I've never sat in one. I've never driven one, so I don't know. I mean, it seems cool from what I've seen of it so far. And as far as whether it can beat a Macan, I mean, I think everyone's still going to go for the Porsche. It's just I have to drive a Grecale to see for myself, but it's an uphill battle for anyone trying to fight Porsche at their own game. It's Macan is king for a reason, I think. I actually still have never driven a Macan either, so I can't talk about how those drive. But it seems like they really nailed the Macan and they're a huge hit. And so we'll see what happens with the Grecale. There's a Maserati dealer like 15 minutes from my house. So if they end up actually doing a decent amount of Grecale sales, I'm fairly inclined to believe I'll see them a good bit around here. I've seen one so far on the road, and that's it. So we'll see how well those end up selling. And Brian says, hey, Matt, do you think Chevy should make a comeback with a newer Chevy SS, or do you think it would fail? I think if they marketed it correctly, they definitely wouldn't fail. It's just that they didn't put any marketing money behind the last one because apparently they wanted it to fail. There was an interesting article about why. It was basically like they were forced to take the hold-ins just to fulfill like a quota or some contractual obligations. So they just kind of phoned it in deliberately because they only wanted to sell a certain amount, and that was it. I can't remember all the credibility of that as far as whether that's the actual legit story or not, but that's what I've heard. So if they actually were trying to attack it, and do a really good iteration of the SS, I think they could totally knock it out of the park. I think give it good styling. The SS name's a little tricky though, since it's used on other stuff. So I mean, I always, with the SS, I thought they should have called it the Chevelle. And I think doing a new Chevelle, if they do an electric Chevelle that's fast and impressive, I think that could be a huge hit, and it'd be something that kind of beats the Charger in its own game as well. So, it'd be a fun idea for sure. But I think there was talk of, Chevy doing some type of EV sedan, and I think they're developing one for like China and stuff, but we'll see, if we get it here in the States or not. And okay, so I see Jean says thoughts on Ford dropping the Predator engine in the Navigator and going for the Escalade V. That'd be fun, but Lincoln doesn't care about the performance stuff. So yeah, I don't think you're ever going to see that happen. Unfortunately, the most hot thing you will probably see from Lincoln is the Aviator Grand Touring, which has the plug-in hybrid thing with what I think it's like 650 pound-feet of torque or something. That's going to probably be the fastest Lincoln you'll probably ever see as far as modern times goes, until the electric stuff possibly. But yeah, I don't think it'd be an awesome idea. If I were running Lincoln, I'd say, yeah, totally, let's do it. But I don't think they ever will. Truck and Car Guy said, do you think they'll bring the new Fiat 600 to the States, considering the 500 is more of a niche thing here? I mean, they tried selling the 500X here, and whether or not it did very well, I don't think it really sold that hotly. But if they are justifying the 500E, then I think they could justify the 600 as well, because there's people that certainly, especially that whole segment right now, is very underserved. There aren't any electric subcompact crossovers really. So I think that could be something that could do well for them until more competitors show up at least. And even still, I think they could definitely have a business case, I think, for the 600 here in the States. And he also says, we'd love to see a proper Chevelle coming back. Yeah, that'd be fun. We'll see. And Joel said, what do you think about the 2025 Toyota 4Runner getting styling cues from the Lexus GX? If that happens, I just don't know, because we've been hearing about how the Land Cruiser is coming back, and they confirmed that this week. So, where does the 4Runner fit into that? And where does the Land Cruiser fit too? It's, if the rumors are correct about that being GX based, is there enough room for 2 GX based things like that? I just don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with the 4Runner. It'd be very curious to see where we're at, this time next year or even later. We'll see what they do with the 4Runner, because one important thing to note about any of this stuff, they confirmed Land Cruiser is coming back. We have not seen, at least as far as I know, I don't think anyone has seen any kind of prototype running around. There's been no spy pictures of any kind of new Toyota crossover running around or SUV running around. No one's seen any spy shots of a new 4Runner, I don't think. So we may still be waiting a long time for both of those. If they're not even showing up in testing yet, I don't know. I would not hold your breath for any kind of new, Land Cruiser or 4Runner anytime soon. I mean, they're starting to tease the Land Cruiser, so maybe that's actually on the horizon. that I just have no clue. That one's a big mystery to me. It's I don't it just they've kind of done a very good job of either hiding the prototypes or, again, like I said, it's way far out. We'll have to see. Hugo, thank you so much for joining in. Said just tuned in. I forgot you were doing your stream Saturday. LO, not Sunday. Yeah, save the Camaro, don't kill it. Yeah, I wish that Chevy agreed, but it sounds like they were saying Camaro may come back, but it's probably just gonna be the name on some other thing. I think I'll just be happy if it's at least a coupe or a sedan, honestly. But if they put it on a crossover or something, then it's just gonna be unfortunate development. We'll have to see. So Matt says, I've been watching your channel for years, but this is my first time joining the live chat. Thanks, Matt, for all the awesome content, and love your channel. Thank you so much for watching, Matt. I really appreciate you for joining in and for supporting the channel all these years. And yeah, thanks. If you have any other thoughts here, the comment section is a little slower today. So anyone else, I'll be able to answer some more non-member questions than usual here, I think, this week. So anyone else that has any other questions? I see Aqua Matt says, any more updates on that GR-EV Toyota is developing? Nothing since yesterday that I talked about. So, we'll see how that develops and if it even comes to market. Because like, Akio Toyota was saying, it may not even get approved for production. So we'll see, if there's anything actually materializes there or not. Because there's all kinds of stuff that, is under development and then just gets killed either early on or last minute. The new WRX STI is a prime example. I guarantee you they had an STI in development, and then they killed it for whatever reason, and stuff like that happens all the time. And Hugo says, seems like Toyota doesn't really refresh their vehicles since they sell so well. The 4Runner is due for a refresh. Yeah, I mean, 4Runner's very due, just like the Tacoma was, but they're selling really well. So yeah, what's the rush? I don't blame them for keeping it around, and it has its own appeal for having that, dated thing. It's kind of, I think, just trying to figure out, where's the cutoff point of like, how long do we milk this before, that number dwindles to the point where people are like, okay, I'm waiting for a new one because this is getting way too old at this point. But I don't know if they've reached that point yet with the 4Runner. We'll see, again, what they end up doing. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Toyota does here in the next year or two. And Truck and Car Guy says, hopefully Camaro doesn't go full SUV. And Jersey Boy Greaser said, putting iconic names on crossovers is blasphemy. Yep, it definitely is unfortunate. We will see. But Chevy doesn't seem to really care too much about that stuff. So they could very well. I mean, they're talking about having Corvette SUVs and all that too. So I don't think anything is sacred anymore for any of these car companies. Let me see. So Wannabe ST says it's a shame about GM. They made some really interesting vehicles in the past. Now it seems like going all electric and SUVs/trucks. Yeah, except, I mean, they did approve, there's this new V8 coming for GM. It'll mostly probably go on their trucks and stuff, but there's talks now that the C9 Corvette could potentially still be V8 powered. So I don't know if GM is going all in on EVs just yet, like Volkswagen and some others are. I think at least, I think one of their executives I talked about in my one weekly update, he said, like, we understand that, like, yes, 2035, we are still going full EV, but between now and 2035 is, 12 years away. And there's a lot of sales that can be had in 12 years until we get to that point. So that's why they justified doing a new V8. And so I think, you're going to still see a lot of that stuff from GM for the next 12 years here. After 2035, it's anyone's guess. We'll see how things develop and change or don't change in the world, in those next 12 years. But, in the meantime, GM's going to keep on pumping out the V8s for a good while still. Jean says the original 4Runner was similar to the original Bronco, a two-door SUV with a removable roof. So Toyota could go to the route and make it similar to the Wrangler and the new Bronco. Yeah, I mean, Toyota has to be seeing the Bronco frenzy and wanting to get in on that, and the Wrangler. I mean, and so that's why, like, I thought, all the rumors keep saying it's going to be GX based for the new Land Cruiser. But to me, it's like, hello, make the Land Cruiser the Wrangler competitor, because it's Land Cruiser doesn't have as much equity here in the States as 4Runner does, because right now, the past 15 years, anyone who bought a Land Cruiser is buying a super expensive thing that sold in the hundreds each year. They did not sell a lot versus the huge amount of sales for 4Runner. I think, if you're going to upset one group of people, I think upsetting the Land Cruiser group is an easier pill to swallow than the 4Runner fans. So to me, I would say leave 4Runner as it is, make that, Tacoma based, and just basically take the Tacoma, put a cab on the back of it, call it the 4Runner and call it a day. And then, have Land Cruiser be some type of totally fresh, clean sheet thing that goes after the Wrangler or the Bronco. That would be how I would play it. To me, that makes the most sense, but we'll see if Toyota sees it the same way, or if they, see it the way you do, and maybe have the 4Runner go in that direction instead. We'll see. It'll be very interesting, like I said, to see what they end up doing here. And Trent Car Guy said GM seems to be following Ford. Hugo says Camaro Cross. I hope they don't. Would not surprise me. Would not surprise me, unfortunately. Tom says, is the MT82 as bad as they say? Could it just be the clutch? The clutch is definitely tricky in the Mustangs. It's one of my least favorite clutches, even though I own one, and I've owned 4 of these Mustangs with this manual. It is definitely a very tricky clutch. It's one of the least user-friendly clutches out there because of the weird spring and the clutch pedal. But also, even if you remove that spring, it's still just a little weird. I don't love the clutch. That's one of the things about the Bullet. One of the few things I do not love about the Bullet is the clutch. The MT82 transmission isn't bad. It's not bad at all. And it just seems though the MT82 is paired up with that clutch exclusively. Because, like, for example, when you go to the GT350 with the Tremec, the clutch is fine in a GT350. The clutch is totally normal. It's a totally different feel than a regular manual Mustang. So it's like those two have to be paired up weirdly in the regular Mustang for some reason, but not in the Shelby. I still have not driven a Mach 1. I'm hoping to drive a Mach 1 someday and see how that does. See if the clutch is better on that or not. But the MT82 transmission itself is not that bad. I think it's been really overblown. If you're a drag racer or something, it might not be the best because it does like to lock me out a second on a very rare occasion if I'm doing a red line shift. But that's also not exclusive to the MT82. I encountered that in the Supra, the GR Corolla. I encountered it once in the M2 I just reviewed. So that's not an exclusive thing to the MT82 either. So I don't think the MT82 is as bad as a lot of people say it is personally. Goth Rocker says companies should never put muscle car or sporty car names on SUVs. Not jabbing at you, Matt, but I still wish the Mach-E didn't have the Mustang name attached to it. Sorry, I'm traditional. I don't like that it has the Mustang name either. Just for me, it was a good enough vehicle that fit our needs perfectly. And it's a really well done electric vehicle that I decided to kind of compartmentalize the name. I never call it a Mustang ever. I always say the Mach-E whenever we're talking about it. And, I don't like the Mustang thing on it, but to me, it still was just such a good vehicle, especially for what we wanted and needed, that it was worth, putting that to the side and still, enjoying the vehicle because it's still a really good vehicle. It just unfortunately doesn't have the best name. Challenger Chris says the Mustang and the Corvette seem to be going down the Corvair route where they were different versions with the same base name. Like Corvair had a car, wagon, truck. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Getting back to the history there of having, different things on the same name. And, and I guess in that case, it does make sense. I don't know. I still just I feel like that, like with the Corvairs, like they still all had the same bones and they still all had the same front end, and so yes, like that made more sense calling them all Corvair because they were all the same basic vehicle, just with a different, back half basically. Whereas with the Mach-E, it shares nothing with a regular Mustang, so it's to me a little more of a stretch, but I can see your point there with that. Double Strike Photo says, here's an enthusiast question. I suck at driving stick, only done it for 2 weeks. Is it worth learning and refining at this point if I own no manuals? I mean, I guess if it's like a fun new challenge to tackle or something, if it could be a fun thing to just say you've mastered it. But I think really you're never going to master a manual unless you drive one, especially every day, or at least regularly. That's really the key to mastering a manual. If you only drive it a little bit and then you don't drive one again for 5 years, you're going to be rusty and not smooth, most likely. So I don't know if it's really worth going for unless you plan on owning a manual at some point down the road. But if not, I wouldn't bother learning if you're not going to ever use that skill. You're better off spending that time learning another skill that you will be able to put to use or enjoy, in my opinion. But it's a fun thing to learn if you want to try. Just like I said, to conquer a new mountain. And Yavinder, thank you so much for joining in here. Goth Rocker says, problem with the Toyota Land Cruiser a few years back when the Land Cruiser was still sold at the dealership. It was $98,000 for the sticker, not a dealer markup. They are very expensive. Yeah, and that was my problem. I reviewed a Land Cruiser. I had one as a press vehicle about 2 years ago, right at the end of their run. And I was like, why would you buy this over a Lexus LX? I guess there's like a few minute differences, but it's like, for I think it's like $2,000 or $3,000 more for an LX, which is a rounding error when you're talking about that kind of a price tag. You know, I don't know who was buying Land Cruisers in those last few years. There was someone in the comments that was going back and forth with me about why the Land Cruiser is amazing, and I just, I mean, more power to them, but like, to me, it seemed like a giant amount of money for a very outdated vehicle. So I mean, they run forever, but to me, I think a lot of Toyota stuff runs forever, so that's not even really, that much of an exclusive thing to the Land Cruiser. But yeah, that was the problem with them. So that's why I think, take the Land Cruiser. And, to me, I think doing the Wrangler thing would be the better choice. But we'll see what they end up doing. Hugo says, I think the Mach-E should have been a Taurus EV. That would have been cool too. I would have taken basically any name over the Mustang. Jazz says, have you ever driven a Studebaker, Matt? I have not driven a Studebaker. I'd love to drive one someday. I've driven very few classic cars. The ones I've driven, I've loved driving. Any of you who've been watching for a while know I reviewed a 1957 Ford Ranchero with the 3-in-the-tree manual transmission. And that was so cool to drive. It was a very rushed, not an ideal review from a setup standpoint, but I made it work and I enjoyed the drive regardless of, the filming constraints. But that's really the oldest thing I've ever driven, and never driven a Studebaker. My grandfather, though, actually he was a big Studebaker fan. He had a 56 Hawk, and then he had a 59 Silver Hawk, I believe, or maybe it was a 57 Silver Hawk that he had. He didn't have the Golden Hawk, but he had the Silver Hawk, and there's pictures of my dad as a little toddler, like standing next to the giant fins on the Silver Hawks. And so my grandfather was super into Studebakers, and so I'd love to drive one someday just for that reason as well. But I've never driven one or even sat in one, honestly. Raphael says, stuck in freeway construction with every exit closed for miles, but I managed to make it for a little of the chat. Well, thanks for joining, Raphael. I appreciate the effort. Definitely drive safe, though, if you're just listening and not actually watching. There's nothing to see here anyway. Yeah, I don't know. So I was actually I did a little day trip here on Thursday, and little random tangent here, but I don't know how they justify having these like rolling roadblocks. I don't know if you guys get stuck in these either, where when I was driving on Thursday on the Pennsylvania Turnpike here, like I don't know if it wasn't even line painting, but something that's slow like that, where they're just rolling. I was doing like 7 miles per hour for like 25 minutes on the highway with a 70-mile-per-hour speed limit, and there was a huge mile-long line of cars, and then they just like pull off. Like there was no actual work going on. There was just cones, and then all of us being forced to do like 7 miles per hour for 25 minutes with no visible good reason. And I just, I respect everyone that's a construction worker that, does that. I'm sure it's not a fun job in a lot of ways, but I don't know why they don't do more of that stuff in the middle of the night, especially if you're going to like essentially close down the highway in the middle of rush hour. Like who approves these decisions? And same thing, if there's every exit closed for miles and you're stuck just sitting there, like you're held hostage by the construction company, essentially. It's just like crazy. I mean, especially, people have places they need to be and stuff. Like I was on a time crunch on Thursday, and I can't talk about what I was doing just yet. It was a top secret filming thing that I will be able to talk more about next week's live stream. I can talk more details, but so it's just really annoying that when you have somewhere to be and it's like, yep, we're just going to crawl on the highway for no good reason when I'm on a time crunch here. And so like, for example, because I was sitting in that traffic for 25 minutes on Thursday, I didn't eat breakfast. I was like, okay, well, there goes my breakfast time that I had cut out. Like I was running a tight schedule, and that just got blown to smithereens by us doing 7 miles per hour down the highway. So oh, yeah. So I feel your pain, Raphael. Hopefully you can get out of that traffic soon. That is the worst. And so Trent Car Guy saying $98,000 for the Land Cruiser, you'd have a lot of other options. And basically everyone else would, aside from those like 300 people a year that decided to go for it. And Bruce, you said thoughts on the Shelby Cobra 427. So I'm not sure which, because that's, that name's been used so many different times. If you're talking about the original like Shelby Cobras with the 427, super cool vehicles, be a fun one to review someday as well. And it's just a classic design, And Truck and Car Guy said the 427 would be amazing, but not at $1 million or $2 million for a genuine Shelby. Yeah, if I were wanting something like that, 100%, I would go for a replica, because it's still the same experience, basically, So it's like, instead of pulling your hair out driving $1 million car around, have your fun with a replica and, have the same look and all that. Truck and car guy said traffic jams is a daily problem in my line of work. Whew, I'm not envious of that. I would definitely, if I had sat in traffic jams, I would definitely have like Super Cruise or some kind of vehicle that did the steering and stuff for me on the highway, because that is I love driving, but that is like the stuff I do not enjoy doing. And that is one thing that made it better. So whenever I was doing this trip, I was in the Audi Q8 e-tron that I had as my press vehicle this past week. And that does have the traffic jam assist, which I was able to thoroughly test on, on this trip, where it can do the steering for you kind of at low speeds. And Cliff Notes, spoiler, I guess, on the Q8 review, but it actually kept like telling me to put my hands back on the steering wheel, even though it should have been enabled and been fine to do that. But at least it did some of the steering, and at least with the adaptive cruise, you have it doing all the stopping and starting and stopping and starting for you automatically. So that definitely made it more tolerable for sure. If I was in a manual or something, I would have like pulled over and screamed probably if I had to sit in stuff for hours on end every day. That would drive me crazy. But at least, having an automatic, that definitely makes it a lot better. And adaptive cruise makes it even better. Goth Rocker said, Matt, agree. In PA, they do construction during the day. They won't work at night due to safety. Okay. Well, I mean, I appreciate the safety component. I totally understand. But he said, I spoke to the state representative about it. I feel it should be done at night, but safety, they claim. I mean, but they do construction at night. So, where does that line get drawn as far as what's safe and what isn't safe to do at night? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I understand, not everyone wants to work through the night. I'm sure the construction workers have a better quality of life not working the night shift every day. So there's some of that too, but it's tough. Just that time of year where there's construction everywhere. Bruce says, were there any press vehicles that you were glad to see go? I mean, there's stuff where I'm not like, it's fine, but I'm not like excited about it. And so some of those I'm like, yep, I don't mind seeing it go. And so, there's, some of those, but there's never been any, I think, that I'm like truly happy to like get rid of it, because there's nothing that's truly that bad that I've reviewed as a press vehicle that I can remember, at least off the top of my head. So yeah, I don't think there's any that I was glad to see go. That's a good question. Thanks for asking, Bruce. And Aqua Matt says 6 road workers were killed up near you. That was during the day. Interesting. I hadn't heard about that. That's terrible. So I guess maybe during the day doesn't really make it much safer either. Sometimes it's just speeds. I mean, they were saying how in the past, ever since COVID, like speeds have gone up, and you would think that whenever the traffic came back, once people started driving again after that, first initial quarantine period, that, stuff would have slowed down, but it seems like people are still really going fast for the most part. And so that's, it's not great. So yeah, it's unfortunate. It's one of those things. I really wish there was better driver training. Obviously PA, or not PA, just the US in general is just terrible with their licensing requirements, as far as it's so easy to get a license here versus other countries. And so I think that certainly doesn't help with everyone going faster than they're capable of driving and killing people and all that stuff. And the distractions don't help either. But Double Strike Photo says, I'm not sure if I buy the safety angle. It's standard in multiple states that I've heard of, that all major construction has to be done at night. They just use the big light stands. Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought too. And I mean, you have a million flashing lights at you at night, which honestly I think are more visible at night. If you have cop cars with their lights on, you have big flashing construction signs and stuff, that'll get your attention at night more to tell you to, hey, maybe I should slow down. And, then, the lights. So yeah, I don't know. I don't claim to know anything about that whole sector, so I'm not going to pretend to have the solution, but I just don't know why they do that stuff in the middle of the day. And especially like, okay, you want to do it in the middle of the day, or you want to do it in the daylight, fine. But if you're going to shut down the highway for even 20 minutes, like I was stuck in the other day, like for that kind of stuff, like do it at, as soon as the sun rises at 6 a.m. or whatever, or do it, in the middle of the afternoon. Try and figure out where the lowest amount of traffic is during the day and do it then. Don't do it at 8:30 in the morning when everyone's racing to work and stuff. It's just, seems, just not very good planning for whatever reason. But Raphael says, I was on the bike with a heavy hydraulic clutch killing my hand. Cleveland either has construction or winter. Whew, that's tough on a bike. Man, I'm not jealous of you for that. Wow, that's you are a stronger person than me to be sitting in traffic with that. That would not be fun. And yeah, I don't envy you with Cleveland there. You guys get some rough winters. Truck and Car Guy says, if I wanted a Shelby Cobra, I'd build a factory 5 replica, roughly the same experience, fraction of the cost, and you can build it however you want. Yep, totally agree. Goth Rocker says, I feel during the day it's more dangerous, more people on the roads. That's also a valid point there too. Double Strike Photo says, having driven in Germany on a couple of work trips, it's amazing to see what people can actually do with good driving habits. Then coming home to Ohio drivers is very depressing, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I loved, I drove in Italy many years ago, and same deal where it's like, wow, a highway that actually functions the way it's supposed to. Like, imagine that. And then, Thursday I'm on the PA Turnpike and people are all just cruising at 500 the speed limit in the left lane. And there's a rolling roadblock where everyone's doing the same speed. And it's just like, okay, this is my destiny. It's just, man. Yeah. I'm sure we all can go on and on about bad drivers, but it's just, I wish there was some kind of solution that actually worked. And Goth Rocker says, Matt, I agree. We need change. Driver's licenses are given out in PA. I'm sorry. But if you can't read English, how are you driving on our roads in America and have a license? Yeah, I mean, I think they do some of those things where they try to give you, like the symbols and stuff to help make things a little bit better. But yeah, that definitely is a valid point there. Bruce says, flying cars would be nice right now, especially with all these traffic stories. Yeah, we'll see if we ever get there in any kind of meaningful fashion. I don't know if any of you watched the new Grand Tour. They just posted it up yesterday, but they feature a flying car in that. But it's like these very niche things where they build like 5 of them and that's it. So it'd be great to see that someday. But then you have the whole even scarier idea of like unregulated flight going on at low altitudes, and if people are this bad with 4 wheels on the ground, imagine if they were in the sky. So maybe it's one of those things, be careful what you wish for. The Truck and Car Guy says, construction sucks no matter what time of day they choose. During the day, way more traffic, at night, drunks and reckless folks. Yeah, very, very valid point there. Goth Rocker says, in Germany, you have to pay a lot of money for a license, so people take it more seriously. Yeah, and it's a long process. There's a higher age limit. And it's also the insurance, not only just like paying for the license, but insurance is insanely expensive. I had a friend in Germany and he was telling me how it's like, yeah, it's really expensive just to keep a car insured. So it's like one of these things, like, it's not like it has to be a super wealthy person to have a vehicle or anything. There's plenty of middle-class people that still have, licenses and cars and stuff, but it's a lot of a bigger investment for those people. And so they take it more seriously. Yeah. Tom says, back in the late 90s, my father had a 70-something yellow Charger with a hood scoop. He ended up trading to some guy for a newer Lincoln and some cash because people kept trying to race him. That's a fun story. Yeah, I'm sure many people with sporty cars have that same issue where people are always trying to race them. And Yanel says, hey, Matt, hope you and the family are doing well. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks. Any marriage advice you can pass along? Well, first off, a huge congrats. That's an awesome next step there, and hope it all goes smoothly. I know, wedding planning and all that can be very, very stressful. So hopefully you're holding up okay with all that. But as far as marriage advice goes, it's one of those things. Every relationship has, different dynamics and all that. I think, and everyone has different, preferences and standards and stuff. But my advice is, Beth just texted me too. She said, congrats as well from her, and communication is the bottom line. And that's a very good point that I think is universally could be agreed upon, communication. Because if you hold things back, you end up harboring resentment, and, those types of things just can eat away at you and stuff. So I'd say that is definitely a good point. And also, as far as other marriage advice, I'd say, I think a lot of people, I mean, again, this is something that, again, everyone has different dynamics and stuff, but I think, in my opinion, like one of the things that I really, focused on, that I think I at least wanted to do in my marriage, is to really focus on just being selfless in a lot of ways, and being okay with like not doing everything you want to do all the time. It's a give and take thing, and I mean that's kind of an old thing that everyone always says, it's give and take, but like it really is like, that's an easy thing to say, but it's sometimes harder to do in practice, and to actually be like, I'm okay missing out on this movie, I'm okay not having this for dinner, or whatever. Those types of small things, again, most people have already hashed that stuff out in your dating relationship, but it's just one of those things that I think is a good relationship thing in general. Just trying to, I think be selfless is really, really helpful. Obviously, it doesn't mean sacrificing yourself completely, but just, really putting, your partner's needs ahead of yours. Something I think as a culture, we're getting more and more selfish these days in a lot of ways. And I think that is part of what's really hurting a lot of marriages, especially in the past few decades here. And I think, being okay with not getting your way is a good thing. And again, there's plenty of give and take. There's lots of times where I get to do something that Beth might not be super excited about or whatever as well. So there's definitely, again, like I said, that goes both ways. But I think that to me is a real crucial key. And I think a lot of people that I've seen that, end up either getting divorced, or the divorce stories that I've heard and stuff, it's about like wanting different things and not being able to compromise, and wanting what you want, and just, that whole thing. And so I think that's a potential, pitfall there. So I'd say that's the best thing I can say, is to make sure that you are okay with, the sacrifice a little bit there, but obviously there's so much upside, so much fun, and you have, hopefully your best friend there right by your side, for the rest of your life. And that's the really exciting part of it. So best of luck to you though. And thanks for the fun question there. Trident Car Guy says, frankly, they step up requirements for the licensing, getting back to that. And Raphael says, I'm done complaining about traffic. Isn't it odd that we suddenly get all these nice manual cars just in time for the last hurrah before everything goes electric? Yeah, it's just, I think everyone's realizing you got to seize the day and enjoy things while we can, because these things will be going away, unless you're Toyota or Honda. I think it's potentially considering a manual electric thing down the road too, and maybe a few others. But yeah. And Jazz says, Matt, are you going to start a marriage advice YouTube channel? Sorry. Are you and Beth going to start a wedding advice channel? You would be great. At first I was joking. Don't put her on a pedestal. Yeah, that's always a good piece of advice as well. And however, in listening to you would be good. Yeah, that's another good advice there. No advice channels though from us for sure. Yeah, far from perfect. All the advice I think is already out there basically too. Harris says, happy early Father's Day, Matt, and to all the fathers out there. Have a blessed day, and remember, everyone is every day is y'all's day. Kick ass. I appreciate that, Harris. Thanks so much for joining and for the well wishes there. Hope you're having a great weekend as well, Harris. And let me see. So Joel says, what do you think about the Chevy Tahoe refresh? Do you think it looks like the Trailblazer and Blazer? I don't know if I've seen a Tahoe refresh. Maybe is that something that just came out, or is there maybe a render? I haven't seen anything official about a Tahoe getting a refresh really. But I'll have to keep an eye out for that. And Bruce says, great advice, Matt. I found it useful as well. So glad you got some use out of that. Jazz says, listen to Matt on how to be a good spouse. Again, I'm not perfect by any means, but just the stuff that I picked up over the years here, which is it'll be 8 years here soon for Beth and I. So we keep on trucking here, and we almost at 10 years here, not too far away from that. And SLMD says, happy early Father's Day. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining in. Double Strike Photo says, I think a big key is recognizing that people do things differently. Yeah, again, something you'll find when dating, but don't expect your spouse to necessarily do things the same way you are, and that's okay. Yeah, totally agree. And again, it comes down to different situations, whether or not you've lived with the person before getting married, but that's another, kind of learning curve there. If you haven't lived with them before then, that I've encountered from a lot of people is, just the whole like, oh, you do this, you do the dishes differently, or you whatever, you just random little things like that got to iron out, in the early years of marriage there. And Triton Gaga says, I'm going to stay out of it because I'm single. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that either, so totally can appreciate that. Nathaniel says, I'm over Toyota fans. Look around, plenty of American cars of old ones on the road and towing. Are people blind? The Land Cruiser is meh, independent front suspension. Wrangler is king. These Scotty fans. We'll see what they do with the new Land Cruiser as far as what that ends up actually using. If it is the GX, everyone again has different preferences. As far as, Wrangler is great for a lot of people, and for a lot of people that is the solution. Bronco's really great though, and I think is a really worthy competitor. And I don't know even about the whole. I know the Scotty comment was kind of a funny mention there, but I don't think Scotty Kilmer is much of a fan of Toyotas anymore, right? I heard he was kind of on a rampage against Toyota recently. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's just kind of what I've been overhearing. I don't ever watch his channel, but But anyway, let me see. Goth Parker says, I'm never getting married. I work too hard for everything I have, not risking losing it to divorce. Everyone I know is divorced and miserable and had many kids. The poor kids are just lost souls. That's very unfortunate to hear. I mean, it's a 50% success rate, so it's a flip of a coin. I can totally appreciate that as well. Obviously, there's prenups and stuff for people that are worried about protecting the financial aspect, but yeah, the kids that get caught in the middle are definitely unfortunate. And yeah, there's a whole lot, that's obviously a very, very common thing that, is an issue. And, there's all kinds of theories and, reasons as to why, it goes into that, unfortunately, these days. But it's not easy. That is one thing. It's definitely not easy. And Challenger Chris says, during your update, you talked about the solid state batteries in Toyota. Did they mean they were going to put the new batteries in existing cars or new generation cars? I believe that's all new generation stuff. I think that's all. They're either going to be on new platforms, a brand new dedicated EV platform. They're going to be new production lines with gigacasting. I believe all that stuff for the solid state is going to be all that whole next generation stuff. And a lot of outlets are suggesting that we'll first see the solid state batteries in like the Lexus LFA successor. And that would be like $500,000 and be like a really exclusive high-end thing as a first test case for those. And maybe they won't actually reach any kind of mass production until later on, maybe 2030s or something. We'll have to see again how fast they can ramp it up and what the costs are for those. So, so we'll have to see, just how widespread that is. But even they said, their new formulation for their lithium ion batteries is going to have over, 600 miles of range potentially. And at that point, I mean, there's some really impressive batteries. So I think there's, even if we don't get the solid state stuff for a while, even the regular lithium ion stuff they're working on sounds like it's very, very, very impressive. And I mean, Toyota's been doing hybrid stuff for so long. They really know how to do battery packs and efficiency and all that really well. So, I think now they're finally going all in on the EV thing, it seems, at least for the most part. I think that they'll really have some great strides, going into that stuff. And Bruce says, I shared that render of the Mustang front end on a Explorer with you, and your response was great. Okay, yeah, that was you. Yeah, that was I don't know if you guys saw that floating around on Instagram. There is someone rendered a 2024 Mustang front end on an Explorer and said that could be like the Explorer refresh. And I hope it's not, because one, that desecrates the Mustang even further, and then two, it's like, I mean, I guess it looked okay, but it's just, I do not, like, please, like, leave the Mustang alone. Like, it's bad enough it's got the Mach-E, going with it. It's hopefully the Explorer doesn't get Mustang styling. And Truck and Car Guy says he can agree about the newer Wranglers here. And Joel says that question about the Tahoe, it's a 2024, 2025 Yukon Denali that was spotted testing. Interesting. So I've not seen that, but yeah, I'll have to check it out. I'm sure they'll all probably get that Blazer inspired thing at some point though. And the 1KS says, hey Matt, where are all the BEV minivans? My wife and I are actually contemplating minivans right now, and I'd really like to get an EV minivan, but I'm not aware of any that exist now or yet. So it seems like Chrysler will probably be the first. They've been talking about it, and they had a very concept-y, but an idea with their, I think it was called the Chrysler Portal concept, was an electric minivan they put out there as a concept. So I think Chrysler is going to be the first to do it. But if you want something in the immediate term here, the best electrified thing right now that you can get that's closest to an EV is the Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid. That gives you, I believe it's like 30 some miles of electric range. It's only front wheel drive, so you have to be okay with that. But otherwise, it's the V6 still, but has the plug-in hybrid component, and you get the electric experience for 30 some miles a day, and kind of be a nice entry into BEVs for you as well, if that's something that you're open to. And the Pacifica is great in general. It has the biggest touchscreen in the segment right now. I think some of the best comfort in the segment. They really, I mean, Chrysler's been doing minivans longer than anybody else, really. They do a really good job with them, and I think the Pacifica is great. So I think that's a good recommendation in the meantime if you are considering and open to that. And Trent Carga says too much Cherokee in the new Wranglers. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're talking about the refresh or what, but I mean, I think the Wranglers still are they got that trademark look and have their very loyal following. Goth Rocker says, Matt, you covered it a month or two ago. Ford is actually making a lifted Mustang. Dealer told me people have been called to be put on a list. Interesting, or have called to be put on a list. Yeah, so I mean, it's probably gonna be the Mustang Raptor, which I think Car and Driver broke that story that I covered as well. But Yeah, it's probably gonna happen. You know, I mean, some people seem like they're actually into that more than they are the Mach-E, which I can understand, I guess, because it's a little more of a like cool factor with a lifted Mustang, I guess. But I still just like, to me, it just makes me think of all the like backyard mechanics that have taken truck chassis and put these Camaros and Mustangs from 20 years ago on them. It just does not seem like a like a cool thing to me, but we'll see what they end up doing. Maybe it'll win me over or something, but I'll never buy one, that's for sure. And Truck and Car Guy said, as far as I know, there's no EV vans yet. The hybrids, yeah. And so Pacifica plug-in hybrid. There's also the hybrid Sienna as well. It's not plug-in hybrid, but that gives you some little electrified component as well. But yeah, it's surprising that no one's done it yet. And Jersey Boy Greaser says Wranglers want to talk about overpriced plastic junk. I mean, I don't. It again, it comes down to the buyer. It really is. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think that half the people driving Wranglers that never see dirt, yes, those people would have been better off buying something else. But again, everyone likes something different. Car purchases are often not rational, and people like what they like. But it is amazing to me though, the sheer amount of people that are driving Wranglers, and not just like base Wranglers, but like loaded up Wranglers. And it's like you are paying like probably at least 50 grand for something that is not comfortable, that does not actually like drive that great. Again, unless you are going off the beaten path. But all these things are like pristine, no dirt on them whatsoever. They don't have any off-road tires or anything. They're just, and people just are happy to pay 50 grand whenever like that 50 grand could get them like a super nice luxury vehicle or so many other vehicles that, yeah, again, in my shoes, I would never in a million years buy a Wrangler. But certain people just to them, they always wanted a Jeep or whatever. I don't get it either, but again, I respect everyone's different preferences. It would be a boring world if we all drove the same thing and all had the same opinions. So, I respect the people that buy Wranglers for 50 grand. It's just, I don't know. It's just a lot of money to spend on something that has like cloth seats still and a tiny screen and no comfort. But hey, everyone likes something different. And let me see. So, Goth Rocker says, I don't get it. A Mustang is a Mustang, but maybe it'll be cool to see it lifted. Yeah, we will see. I mean, they're selling out of the 911 to cars and the Huracan Storado or whatever they call it, so I guess they think there's a market there for it potentially. And yeah, Goth Rocker also agrees about people wasting money if they're not using their Wrangler off-road. Yeah, but a lot of people, it's still just a cool thing to have sitting up nice and high, and that again, that mental boost of like, ooh, I could go anywhere, or if the world ends tomorrow, I can drive off into the abyss and be fine. And some people, especially, I think I read a few articles about it, and it might get into some political stuff, so I won't go too deep into the article, but they're basically saying how there's more and more appeal for off-road ready vehicles, or even vehicles that just are branded as that or marketed as that, even if they don't actually have that capability. And it's basically just a reaction to the more extreme weather we're seeing, and just the just general fear that's out there these days and stuff. There's a lot of that, and so having something that's rough and tough and ready to go comforts people. And so if that's the reason why some of these people buy Wranglers as well, again, no judgment there. Just not something that I would put my own money on, and it seems like many of you wouldn't either. And Truck and Car Guy says the Pacific is actually a pretty nice van. Yeah, and you get it in all-wheel drive, and there's lots of good options there. Challenger Chris says the all-new Bronxstang. Yep, don't count that out. I mean, anything's possible with Ford, especially. So we'll see. Kevin says, did Mazda remove the base Turbo 3 model for 2024? I think they did. I remember reading that a while back. So I think, yeah, now it's just like the Premium Plus one, which is still like 35. And when you look at other stuff these days, it's actually still not a bad price, but I believe they did. I have to double check that. I'm pretty sure they did. And Fernando says, I think the Bronco is better in so many ways. I agree with you, Fernando. I think it drives so much better tech. Yeah, if it were me and I had to buy either a Wrangler or a Bronco, 100% I'd go Bronco all day, every day. And VQ says right-hand drive Wrangler for the UPS. USPS is the only one I'd buy just for the troll factor. I'm not sure if they still sell it though. I think they still do sell it. I believe they do, and that would be hilarious. You're right. That would be that'd be fun to just get everyone's reaction to that. And so Bruce says, is that a poster of Batman on the wall behind you? Yeah, so it's actually, I guess it's like a wooden thing or whatever. But yeah, it was one of the things got whenever we moved into our house here, actually as a gift. And so just one of the old comic, covers there from 1988, June of 88. The Detective Comics there. So I'm a Batman fan, so that was a good gift from a friend. So it is. I got all kinds of trinkets and random stuff behind me there. So it's all a whole big hodgepodge of stuff. Trent Carguy says, I'm still surprised Dodge never did a Hellcat Caravan, even if it was just for the lulz. Yeah, it would have been cool. I mean, it seems like, what is it? Speedcore, I think is the company that they just did that basically, or they said it was like a Mother's Day thing. I don't know if it's just a render, or if they actually built one or not. But I feel like the problem is, can you actually fit that motor under the hood there without like destroying the firewall and just, the whole integrity of the vehicle? I don't know. It'd be cool to see, something like that if they could have, but I don't think there's enough room, honestly. I could be wrong, but it would have been fun. I think that it just was a bridge too far for even Dodge to do, but maybe we'll see a fast electric van down the road. We'll have to see. Goth Rocker says, I would go Bronco as well. Ride alone is so much better. Yeah, ride is so much better. Joel says it's on the GM Authority page as far as the Tahoe, so I'll definitely have to check that out and see that, because I don't think I've seen that. Jersey Boy Greaser says, I'm just a dying breed, man. I hate modern vehicles, even though I daily had 2019 Tundra, but I love my 64 Polara and my 59 Sportster. Just so much more character and passion in older vehicles. I totally agree with you there. I love old cars. You can see all the classics I got there, the 39 Ford, the 50 Ford convertible, and some other classics over there as well. I'd love to have some classic cars someday. I just don't have the garage space or the money or the time to tinker with them, but I would love to have a bunch of classics someday too. I agree. There's so much more character. And just like, even when I reviewed the 57 Ranchero in my review, I was like, this is just an event. It's so much more engaging. Actually having to like steer to keep the car on the road because it doesn't just naturally center itself. And there's just so much more involvement. So I agree. It's a great experience driving a classic. Let me see other questions here. So we got a little bit of a lull here. Let me see if anything I missed. So Mad Dog says, do you think if they didn't kill off the Volkswagen Targ in the States and replace it with the Atlas, would it still sold as well as the Q8/Cayenne, etc.? I don't think so. I think, that luxury badge is really important to keeping those vehicles sold well. So I think Touareg was just, never going to do super well here in the States. It's unfortunate because they did some really cool stuff with the Touareg over the years, but I just feel like people spending that kind of money, like the new one, I think, obviously the exchange rate's different. We'd see what it would be if they actually sold it here in the States. But the new one is like 90 grand, I think, for the top one. It's like, yeah, even if it was 80 here in the States, I don't know how many people would go for an $80,000 crossover like that. That's not even that big necessarily, but yeah, it's cool though. I mean, Touareg has a loyal following with a few people that appreciated them, but it's just not very many did. Marcus says, any thoughts on the new X5 plug-in hybrid? Haven't driven one, can't say anything about. I've driven the current generation X5, but not the plug-in hybrid version. I think it's a cool idea though. I think plug-in hybrids are great. I think it's a really nice entry level for people that want to try out the electric thing or just want the electric experience without the range anxiety and stuff. I love plug-in hybrids. I think they're a really solid idea for basically anybody, unless you don't have a garage or a driveway. In that case, get a regular hybrid. But otherwise, if you have a garage and a driveway, I think a plug-in hybrid is a great choice as long as it's not, insanely priced. But if you have good incentives around you, with your state tax incentives or something, then I'd say 100% plug-in hybrid is a great choice. Goth Rocker says, old cars were machines, new cars are computers. They certainly are in some ways, but I still think a lot of them still do have some soul. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them still, are a lot of fun. And to Tom, thank you so much for another super chat. He says, how's the steering on the EcoBoost Mustang? Is it communicative? When you own an EcoBoost, how is the MPG when cruising on the highway? Sorry for spamming about which car to get. I'm just indecisive. I totally agree. It's indecisive as well. Trust me, you're in good company here. So as far as steering on the EcoBoost Mustang, it is not the most communicative. It's a little vague, if I'm honest. It's not bad, especially by modern standards. But if you're like, I know you were talking about SIs and Civics and stuff in last week's live stream. If you are considering an SI, I will tell you right now, it's got way better steering than an EcoBoost Mustang by a mile, better handling too, and all that. But if you're, considering the EcoBoost because you want something with a little bit of a softer ride, it's just a very, very different feel. It's just a little softer, a little more relaxed. So I wouldn't say steering is a high point on the EcoBoost Mustang. It's not terrible, and I don't think it's a deal breaker, but if that's something you really focus on, you're really into, then I would say Camaro is maybe slightly better, but it's not amazing really. And what's the MPG I got on the highway? I believe my memory's a little fuzzy on that, but I think the highest I ever saw was like 33 or 34 MPG on the highway, which is pretty good, for 300 horsepower. But it's not far off though from what I got in my Bullet. Like the Bullet, if I cruise in sixth and don't go super quick, I can actually manage 30 MPG in the Bullet too. So it's not a huge change, and we'll come down to gearing as well, because some GTs who have the shorter gears, especially like the pre-2018s with the shorter gears, won't do as well on the highway. But yeah, I mean, it's still, I'd say, pretty good fuel efficiency. You have the active grille shutters on the EcoBoost and stuff, which certainly help. So yeah, I think it's pretty nice highway cruiser. So comfortable. The Mustangs, if you want something that cruises on the highway nice, Mustangs are so good. If you have any other questions, though, feel free to ask them, Tom. I'll try and keep an eye out in the comments below as well, so you don't have to keep doing super chats if you don't want. But I appreciate the support, and thank you so much again for the super chat. And Truck and Car Guy, thank you so much also for gifting the 5 memberships there. I really appreciate it, and glad to see all of you were able to snap those up. He said, somehow almost forgot. Well, no worries. I mean, I know it gets expensive gifting memberships every week, so no pressure to keep up the tradition. I totally understand. I appreciate it, but definitely don't feel any pressure ever for any of that stuff. I try, and especially this week, we have a little bit of a slower comment feed here, so I'm able to answer questions a little better than usual. And Isaac says, bring on the Ultium bolts. I agree. I hope they actually are able to do that, like we were talking about in the weekly update here. It'd be great to see a sub $30,000 Ultium bolt that has a little more practicality maybe, but I mean, they're so good already with the back seat and the trunk and stuff. So I think, yeah, bolt with the new platform be awesome. And Bruce says, I'm a Batman fan as well. The Batmobile startup from the Batman movie had an amazing engine sound. Yeah, they all had awesome startups. All the Batmobiles have been always awesome. They did such a good job with all the Batmobiles. Although I still have not seen the new Batman movie, so I don't know about the Robert Pattinson Batmobile, but all the other ones have been pretty awesome. And let me see other questions here from members. First, Goth Rocker said, best Batmobile to me is the Tim Burton era Batmobile. I love that look. It was definitely one of the wildest ones for sure. It was a fun one. They're all fun in their own ways, though, in my opinion. So let me see other questions here. So VQ says, what are your thoughts on Mitsuoka? They build modern cars with classic front and rear design. So I heard about them a long time ago, but then if you watch the Grand Tour, they just posted up yesterday, there's one of those in that. And it's interesting. I mean, that thing looks kind of odd. That's a little overboard to me as far as classic cars go. I'm not into that kind of generation of classic car stuff. It's an interesting idea. And I think for the right vehicle, I could see it, being a cool thing. But to me, the fun of classics is not just the look, it's the driving experience and, the very communicative driving experience and stuff. So to me, I'm not crazy about something that just looks old, but then is actually new. I know, I mean, obviously the whole retro, what do they call it? I'm missing the word right now. Whenever they, modify a classic car and put the new stuff in it, that's, to me, like, that defeats the purpose. Like, I know some people just love the look, and again, everyone likes something different, but to me, like, if I someday do manage to get a 68 Mustang that looks like the one from Bullet, I want the same engine as the actual 68 Mustang has. I want that old transmission. I want that old brakes even. I know the brakes thing is a safety issue for some people, but to me, I want the experience. If I'm driving a time capsule, I want it to feel like it felt in 1968, not what it would feel like is some Frankenstein thing in 2023. Like, to me, that just defeats the appeal for me. But again, I know a lot of people, they do want that old look, and just want the new stuff. And I totally appreciate that as well. And let me see other questions here. So Brianna says, how much did you make in ad revenue off your Batman footage? It's been a long time, so I'm trying to remember. It was several million views. I think it's yeah, it's been a long time. So this is gonna be a foggy recollection, but I would say maybe it was a few $1,000s. It was definitely no more than 5, but I think it was, yeah, a couple of $1,000 is what I ended up making off the Batman footage, I think, just because they were, again, getting millions of views. So that's where, you made the good money, especially back then when the ad rates weren't super great. But interesting question. Thanks for, I guess you're a longtime fan, Brianna. I appreciate that. That Batman footage definitely helped to catapult the channel to just, from a subscriber point. I got, I think, maybe 5,000 subscribers or something from that. And obviously I started posting car videos, so who knows how many of those people actually watched after that. But that was a fun time for sure. Timothy says, "Do you ever feel conflicted about being a classic car lover but being so adamant about car safety features?" Very good question, Timothy. I do feel conflicted. Yeah, and that's why I would never like daily drive a classic car personally, because it is a risk and it's a very high risk. I mean, it's you get hit in one of those things, it's not going to be a good time. So that is definitely something that, especially now being a dad, I'm even more iffy about. I think, part of the reason why, like with the classic cars I like the larger ones. I wouldn't own a Beetle or own, a tiny little, Triumph or something small like that, because then you really have nothing. I mean, obviously still don't have much protection even in the huge stuff, but at least with that, someone rear ends me, I got another foot of crunching to go before it crunches into me versus something tiny that you're immediately just getting destroyed. So yes, I think that's my only little solace is that. And also some of the like later 60s stuff, like a 68 Mustang had a padded steering wheel, so the steering wheel wouldn't impale you immediately if you got into a front end collision. Yeah, so I try and find little solaces here and there with things like that if I were owning a classic vehicle, but it would certainly be something I'd be extra careful, super vigilant, always, on the defensive, even more so than I already am with driving, so it would just be one of those things I'd be very careful about. But even like I've been considering, like if I did have a classic, would I actually take my daughter in it? Like I'd want to have her experience that, but would I want to take it out on the road? Like maybe I just drive around the neighborhood with her or something, and not, on the roads where everyone's staring at their phones and scrolling TikTok while they blindly drive into the oblivion. That's a little more nerve wracking for me. So yeah, I do feel very conflicted. And you're very, very right on there with calling that out, because it's a conundrum that I have that doesn't seem like it would reconcile itself. But I have a huge appeal and draw to those cars still, that I think I try and just compartmentalize the safety issues in those. But it's certainly something I'd probably drive it once a week, and try and drive during low traffic times, where I have a minimal risk of having other people on the road, as much, just to try and give me the best chances possible. And Truck and Car Guy said the Bolt sounded like a pretty good value. It really was. He says it's too small for me though, and I like gas burners. Totally understand. And Challenger Chris says carburetors count. No way I would LS swap my '67 Firebird. Yeah, well, I'm glad we agree. And yeah, it's an awesome car. Congrats on having one of those. And the Weekend Driver says, can we hear your opinion about the Lotus Emira? I have an allocation that should be fulfilled near the end of the year pending delays. I mean, I think it's a great alternative to the Cayman for, as far as the surface level stuff goes, the specs and what we know about it so far. I've not driven it, of course, so I can't give any kind of good opinion on it. But I just think it's cool to just, not be another Cayman, and have something different. I think that's hugely appealing. We will see how it sells. I actually have a Lotus dealer, amazingly, like 15 minutes from my house as well. So if, there's going to be Lotus Emiras popping up, hopefully I'll at least see a couple around here. We'll see how well they do sales wise, but I hope it does well. And kudos to you for putting in an order for one. Hopefully you're able to take delivery of that without too much issue. I heard there's been some price increases. I haven't been keeping up on them, so I don't know all the details on all that, but I hope you enjoy it. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing car. Lotus, when they're doing their sports cars, I feel like they don't really miss. They do a very good job. So I'm sure it'll be a great buy. Whether it'll be better than a Cayman or, the other competitors, I don't know, but it'll just be different and cool. And I think the styling is great, and I think it's going to be, definitely a car worth owning for those people who don't necessarily have to have the best, maybe potentially. I think it's still going to be awesome. So that's about all I can say about it so far. So other questions here. Truck and car guy said, yeah, 68 to 70 Charger is a pretty long car. Yeah, so that gives you a little bit extra forgiveness there before the pain starts to hit you with an accident. And let me see. So Joel says, hi, Matt, 2025 Expedition, heavy camouflage inside and out. I've not seen that one either, I don't think. So I'll have to check that out too. Tiger Nee says, I upgraded from a 2014 Nissan Rogue to a 2017 Infiniti QX50. Congrats. Hopefully you're enjoying the QX50. I know some people aren't crazy about the CVTs in those, but if you had the Rogue, clearly that's something you were okay with already. So it's a nice upgrade. My one neighbor has a QX50 and they really seem to like it. So hopefully you enjoy yours as well. And congrats on the upgrade. VQ says, imagine Matt with a giant classic Cadillac limo. Yeah, that would be really funny. Limos, then you got to worry about like actually parking it, and that would not be something I want to do. But I'd love like a early 60s Cadillac would be another dream classic for me. Again, nice and big, and just so much style and class, and just so cool. I mean, they were so ahead of the times. Anyone who knows classics, like they had self auto dimming headlights in like 1959 or 1960. They introduced that, like crazy stuff that like no one had, like this, space age stuff that they were doing way back then. Cadillac was truly amazing back then. They're still awesome these days, but just like the alien tech that they had for the 60s was like crazy with some of this stuff. And Mike says, Matt, what new car on sale today can be mainstream or luxury do you think is the absolute worst value? I'm gonna need a minute to think about that one. Absolute worst value, I'd say there is something that like I'm trying to think of, but there is one that I remember being like, this is not a good value, but I'm trying to think of what it was. Yeah, it's eluding me right now. If I think of it, maybe if you want to send me a message on Facebook or something, I can answer your question once I have an answer for you there. But there are some things where I review them where I'm just like, this doesn't make much sense from a value standpoint, and I'll say that if it ever comes up. And I feel like there's something fairly recently that I reviewed where that was the case. And actually, so I'll be doing a review on the Toyota Crown. I'm actually posting that on Monday. So a little bit of a spoiler alert on that one. Not like if people care that much, but the Crown is a vehicle where I feel like it's really closely priced to the Lexus and is a big premium over a Camry, where it's one of those things where I struggle to justify where that is positioned pricing wise, because it's not really any bigger than a Camry from a space standpoint. And that's a vehicle where I struggle to find the value in the Crown. Again, for a few people it might make sense, and if you're someone who's tired of waiting for a new Camry and you got the extra money to spend, Crown could be, great for those kind of people. But Crown's one recently where I'm like, I don't know if I see the value here in that. Tom says, is there a car you wanted but went up a lot in price? One car I regret not buying was a first-gen NSX when they were in the mid-30s back in 2017. Not really. I've never had anything that I've wanted to buy and then it skyrocketed in price. Obviously all that stuff from the 90s that, it'd be fun to have someday, like Mark IV Supras. I'd love to have a Mark IV Supra that looks like the Fast and the Furious one that you see right down there. That's a fun like dream car someday. It'd be fun to have a clone of that car. But with Mark IV Supra prices, I'd have to be very rich to ever, get something like that these days. So, there's a few like that. Basically anything from the 90s from Japan that's, skyrocketed in price that I probably wouldn't mind owning, but probably never will, especially with how expensive all that stuff's getting. Hugo says, hey, Matt, non-car question. What type of beer do you like? I don't drink a ton of beer, but I'm not a beer connoisseur, so my answers will probably disappoint you and most other people that are actually into beer, because I don't like IPAs, for example. I know it's very popular right now. I do not like IPAs. Kona Big Wave is one of my favorites. I love a Blue Moon with an orange slice in it, honestly. And I love Dos Equis, Corona. A lot of the mainstream stuff I'm fine with. I don't like the the mainstream American like beers. I've never been super into those necessarily. I know Blue Moon is one, but like I've never been into like the Budweiser, Miller, Coors. I've never been into that kind of stuff. So I'd say anything that's like slightly beyond like frat boy level drinking, like the stuff I kind of like, but I'm not fancy enough to like the IPAs and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I fall in the beer drinking spectrum. But again, I don't really drink beer that much. I would drink more. But I think I kind of just prefer whiskey whenever I am going to drink sometimes. But on a hot day though, nothing beats a cold beer. So I definitely appreciate it, but just usually don't keep it around very often. So it's one of those things I just have kind of as a more fun thing, out of the ordinary. But do love a good beer. Goth Rocker says GM should have never killed Pontiac, but the government made them do it. I love my Pontiac Bonneville. I traded it in with over 300,000 miles, original engine and transmission. The 3.8 V6 was great. Yeah, those run forever. That 3800 motor that they had, right? Yeah, they sounded great. Those things with a supercharger on those. I had a buddy that had a supercharged Bonneville back in high school, and man, that thing. I mean, he was doing some big speeds in that thing back then. I mean, it would fly. Those were awesome cars. I do have a huge appreciation. None of those seem to ever be appreciating, but I have an appreciation personally for all that, like, 90s American stuff, especially GM stuff in particular. For some reason, just again, they were a little like bold and daring with some of the stuff they did, the Saturns and all these cool ideas. I think they just kind of had a lot of creativity back then in a lot of ways. Not that they don't now, but I don't know. I think there's some cool stuff back then that it was really underappreciated these days. People just still haven't really found much. I mean, I guess the Radwood scene's kind of boosting that whole segment of old cars up a little bit, but not a ton. But yeah, Bonnevilles are great. And Challenger Chris says, Matt, do you think the bigger car will come back with the electrics? I think it already has. I think car size is ballooning, and that's part of why, again, not to be grim, but that's why we're seeing all the issues with pedestrian and bicyclist injuries and deaths, because vehicles are bigger, they're heavier now than they ever were. And so even if you have safer vehicles, if there's just more big vehicles out there than there used to be, it creates an issue. So I think 100%, yeah, electric's going to usher that in, because you have a bigger battery pack, and, until battery tech advances to the point where you can downsize them and still have respectable range, you're going to have really big vehicles. And I don't think that's going to change. I think, again, getting back to the safety thing, getting back to, again, the extreme weather that everyone's experiencing and all that, having a bigger fortress essentially is, an appealing thing for a lot of people. And so I think it's just going to keep on, going. We will see if something forces a change there. I think the only thing that I can't remember if I was talking to an engineer for a car company. I think it was on one of my media drives, and I was talking to some either engineer or executive or something from some car company. I don't remember which one, but they were basically saying that, like, one thing to keep in mind with this ballooning vehicle size is aerodynamics. Aerodynamics are terrible for huge vehicles, generally speaking, unless you have a shape like a jelly bean, like the Mercedes EQS and stuff. But, in general, it's just like, in the end of the day, if you want the best range possible, a sedan is going to be the best way to go. And that's why you see like the Ioniq 6 having more range than the Ioniq 5 and things like that. But, they were basically saying, like, there's going to be people who are going to want the bigger range, and you're going to have the selling point of the sedans. Getting back to earlier, we were talking about sedans getting more popular potentially someday. Sedans could also get this new appeal whenever you say, hey, I have the Ioniq 6 with more range than the Ioniq 5. People that might not necessarily need the crossover now are like, oh, well, maybe I'll go for that because I want the extra range for basically the same price, or maybe even less money, if it's not an SUV. So I think, that could slow the rise in vehicle size, eventually, because you just have to have stuff that has better aerodynamics. You can't have everything shaped like a brick if, you want to have good range. So that may help things a bit. But I think otherwise, at least in the near term, things are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And let me see. So Testable Gaming says the XM is a terrible value. Yeah, they are very expensive. I mean, but anything, whenever you're talking about that level of vehicle, value is not really a factor, I don't think, for most XM buyers. So I think it's kind of a moot point for that. But I agree with you. It's not a good value, but I think most of those buyers probably don't care. Jasmo says, I'm a skeptic of the Toyota Crown also, same reasons. Yeah, and I'm sure the video will probably get hardly any views, but that was one of the ones they had to kind of send it to me to kind of fill a gap in the schedule. And again, you'll see in my review, it's a good car in a lot of ways. It's just, I think the pricing is just not where it needs to be. But it's unfortunate because it's going to potentially ruin what is otherwise a good car in a lot of other ways. And Goth Rocker says, nothing wrong with a Blue Moon, but I'm more of a wine guy and love vodka. Yeah, I love wine too. Vodka, for some reason, doesn't agree with me most of the time. It's just like, it always hits me harder than any other kind of alcohol does for some reason, even though gin, strangely, is like the same thing, right, as vodka. But for some reason, like, gin never hits me as badly as vodka does. And maybe that makes no sense. I have no clue. But to me, vodka is like the last thing I ever drink, just because I'm always like not feeling good after having vodka. BT Aurora, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hi, Matt. Is Type R too much for city and daily? I don't think so at all. I think it's a great daily driver. And I actually knew someone that they drove their Type R all across the country and daily drove it, and it was great for them. Yeah, I think it's good, especially the FK8s especially had a nice soft suspension for the refresh version in the comfort mode. I think that's a really nice, comfortable daily driver. The only thing I'll say is you got to climb over those huge seat bolsters, getting in and out. If that doesn't bother you, though, I think it's a great choice, for a daily driver. Excuse me. Great manual, great amount of power, great practicality. I think Type R is great. I mean, I have not lived with the new Type R yet, like I talked about earlier in this live stream. I'm still hoping to get a Type R press vehicle here in the next month or two. And, I will give my thoughts on what it's like to actually live with it at that point, because the new one, I've just done the 1-day launch event thing where we took it on the track for half the day, and then the other half of the day we were driving on the street. So I didn't have, an entire week with it yet. So we'll see in my own daily driving how it pans out. But for now, I think it's actually a pretty good daily driver. Hugo says, do you think they would bring back the Ford Flex? In my opinion, it would do well since minivans are kind of hot in the market. It was the only minivan that I liked. Flex wasn't a minivan, unless I'm thinking of another Flex. Here, the Flex was that giant wagon, which was super cool in its own right. But there was the Ford vans. There was the Aerostar, and then the Windstar, and I think there was one other one I'm not remembering. But anyway, the Flex, I actually saw there's an Instagram page I follow called like Automotive AI or something like that, where they do like fun, like AI generated cars. And one of them was like, they brought back the Ford Flex as like a render. And it seemed like super cool. I'd love to see them bring back the Flex. It's just, again, one of those things, like, unless you're going to have body cladding on it and pitch it as some kind of off-road thing, like, are people going to go for it these days? Unfortunately, probably not. I mean, there will be a few people, but that's what killed the Flex in the first place, was a few people bought it and not a lot, so it makes it a tough thing to justify. Let me see. So Goth Rocker says the XM is ugly, hurts my eyes. Yeah, I don't like them either. I drove past one at the dealership about a week and a half ago now, and yep, they do not look good. Do not like the way they look either. Jazz says, I was not a skeptic of your Crown video. I'll watch it. I'm a skeptic of the car. Yeah, no, I understood. Yeah, sorry if I missaid that. Yeah, I meant the Crown, not the video itself. I just mean a lot of people probably are skeptical of the Crown and therefore won't watch the video, and I understand that as well. But I appreciate you always watching the videos, Jazz. It really is appreciated. That's what helps keep the channel going, is everyone continuing to watch. Trucking Car Guy says, honestly, most modern BMWs hurt my eyes. The M2 Matt reviewed was one of the few that is still relatively conservative. Yeah, and even the M2, though, I mean, like I said in my review, yeah, I think, the one thing, I didn't get into it that much in my exterior comments, but I think if someone makes a body kit for the M2, it'll really improve the look, because I think the core structure and like the grille is fine. It's just that if you've ever gotten up close to an M2, the new one, there's like the grille, like the black like slats, and then you have like this much space between where the grill ends, and then they have this like extension on it for some reason of like thick like bracket of plastic that's body colored, and then it ends. It's like they just had to jut out the nose. Like, I guess they wanted to brag about it being an extra inch longer for some reason. But like if someone streamlined the front end on the M2 and did a body kit where you get rid of the shroud around the grill, but left the grill as it was, and then you just had a bumper that had the less boxy air intakes there in the front, I think would actually still be really good looking. I think it's worth, again, looking beyond the styling because it's such a good driving vehicle. But I think for those who really do love it, I think I'm really excited to see what happens at SEMA this year. I'd love to see a body kit for an M2 and see what companies are coming out with stuff. Because I think with the new front bumper on the M2, you kind of would have the best of both worlds of like awesome M2 experience. And yet, if the styling is a little bit of a stumbling block, then you can have maybe some better styling too. We'll have to see. And Car Dude says Freestar. That's the minivan from 4 I was forgetting. Thank you for reminding me there. And Challenger says, Flex was an SUV. Hugo says, I'm happy that the BMW kept the manual on the M2. Me too. Definitely me as well. And let me see other questions here. So Jordan says, how's the Bullet doing? Also, are we going to see a review on the 2024 Mustang Dark Horse? Bullet's doing great. I'll be doing my 5-year ownership update here in just a few weeks. It's going to be middle of July here when I'll be 5 years with it, believe it or not. As far as my 2024 Mustang review, I was not invited on the media launch that's happening next month for that. So I don't know when I'm reviewing a 2024 Mustang. They will send me as a press car most likely at some point, but usually Ford's pretty slow at sending me cars. So I would say expect the Mustang review next year from me, unless an owner offers one to me at some point here this year before it gets too cold. That's the only hope I have of doing a Mustang review this year. Otherwise, unfortunately, I was not included in that invite list. So it'll be a while, unfortunately. Other questions here. Brianna says the 3 and 4 series look cool. I think they also look pretty good. I think with the refresh, though, it did get a little more polarizing. So they're okay. Yeah, I agree. They're definitely some of the better looking ones out there. And if I had to pick, I'd probably still go for one of those over the more radical looking stuff. But I'm just concerned about the direction of BMW in general still. And Triton Car Guy says the Flex was a wagon. Most people would buy crossovers. Yeah, that's the problem these days. But again, everyone has different needs and wants, and so it's no judgment there either. But Goth Rocker says BMW wants people to think their cars are ugly. They're proud of it. Yeah, and that's what their interview with their executive that does the designs. I talked about in the weekly update too a few weeks back, where he's like, yeah, we don't want something that everyone likes. We want it to be polarizing. It's like, okay, if you want to drive people away from your brand, because I know I've seen so many comments of people being like, I love BMWs, but I'm not following them on this journey of hideous cars. So they are hurting their sales. I mean, I don't know, they know better than I do as far as who their customers are, but I just feel like they are definitely damaging the brand with the styling currently, but we will see. Time will tell. And Charting Car Guy says, give it time and the aftermarket can attempt to fix the M2 styling. Yeah, hopefully. And Seal Forever says, when will we see the new 2024 Sonata N-Line on lots? Love the aesthetic updates, but probably not getting an LSD. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see about the mechanical changes if there are any. It's always the thing where they show the styling in Korea and then we have to wait several months before we see the US styling and all the US specs and stuff. Since it's a 2024, I would assume we will see it. I would like to think by the fall, if not sooner, but I haven't heard anything. So unless something's going to come really quick out of the blue, I have not heard anything about this new Sonatas coming anytime soon. So, I wish I knew, but it can't be that far off. And Ernesto says the previous Gen M2 was beautiful. Even the regular 2 Series looked perfect in my opinion. Yeah, I thought they were great looking cars. They were always really nice. Even the 1 Series before that, I thought was a really fun little car. And VQ says with GM Honda's partnership, do you think GM should have built rebadged Civics and Accords as Cruises and Malibus? That I don't think Honda would ever let them do that. Those cars are way too protected. They would have to have a full-blown merger, I think, before that would happen. Unless GM was paying some good money. But I do not. Yeah, I don't. I think it'll be a cold day in hell before you see a GM badge Civic or Accord. We'll see how things go with consolidation down the road. But GM would have had to give them 10 EVs for that. Yeah, something like that. It just there's no way. It would certainly help GM, but yeah, I think Honda knows they have one of the best, compact and midsize sedans out there, and they would not want to share those, I don't think. But it's a fun idea to think about. I mean, that's stuff that they used to do, back in the 90s and stuff. You had the Corolla was rebadged as the Geo. What is it? The Geo Storm, not the Storm. Prism, the Geo Prism, that's it. Was just a Corolla, and back then, those companies weren't maybe quite as popular. They were maybe willing to make those deals, but I don't think that would ever happen these days. And let me see. So we got 1 more minute. I think I answered most of the questions here, though, so I don't see any new ones. I think I did a pretty good job here covering everything this week. So hopefully those of you, especially who aren't members, were able to get your questions answered here this week. Thanks to everyone that joined here. And yeah, I guess we'll just leave it at that. Challenger Chris says GM and Suzuki catastrophe. Yeah, there's a lot of those interesting partnerships. I mean, again, I got to hand it to GM for, being willing to partner up with so many different companies over the years. It's something that they did out of necessity kind of, but also, just the open-mindedness to work with other companies is also, a cool thing that they've embraced over the years. So we'll see how that changes going into this electric age going forward here. But anyway, we'll end it at that. But thank you all so much for watching, and hope you have a great Father's Day. Those of you who are dads, hope you have a great Father's Day and a great weekend for everyone else as well. And thank you all very much for watching. Stay tuned, like I said, for that crown review on Monday. And yeah, I've got lots of good stuff coming up too. They got some interesting surprises here this week, I can say too. I cannot say anymore, but I will say stay tuned also later this week for some other fun stuff. So anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.